knows this old thing. Oh man, look at that. That's what happens when you play Frizz. Yeah, but we're here to talk about Frizz. So, we piqued your interest with the intro video about Frizz, and now you want to learn more. You want to get into the nitty-gritty. You want to see all the technicalities of Frizz. That's what this video is going to be about. We're going to try and go in-depth so you and your friends can play Frizz with ease. And also in the description of this video, we're going to have the link for the full rules and also a diagram of the field with dimensions and labels and everything. So let's get started. So as you know, the game of Frizz is divided up into 4 quarters, 10 minutes each, with time stoppages for penalty shots and such as that. And then it's also broken into 2 halves with 2 quarters in each half. At the end of the first half, both players' penalties will revert to 0, and then you'll also swap sides of the field. So this is the field drawn out, and these are the different zones that we're going to talk about. Alright, so yeah, we're going to talk about the zones first. So here's a kind of a bird's eye view of the field, and here's the diagram with the links. So let's talk about the zones. So of course we have our out of bounds areas here and here. Then we have the respective score zones. So we have, let's say I'm playing over here. This is my score zone. Cody's over there. Here's score zone. Then we also have the penalty zones, these rectangular areas here. And then of course we have the bounce zone. So let's talk about the lines now. So there's lines that make up these zones, boundaries that we need to discuss. So here we have the pitch line, and the pitch line is the forward line of the score zone, also the back line of the penalty zone, and we'll discuss that later. Here is the penalty line, which is the most forward line of the penalty zone, also makes up one of the boundaries for the bounce zone. Here we have these 2 long lines, which we call the parallels. Those also make up boundaries for the bounce zone and the penalty zones. Here we have slants, which make up the side boundaries of the score zone. Now, it's also important we have noted these dotted lines as imaginary extensions of the pitch line. This actually comes into play a good bit later in the video and when you're playing the game, to be able to imagine these extensions. We also have another imaginary line drawn that represents the back of the score zone, and if you're playing with flags, those flags basically just help you identify the back of the score zone. And we'll talk about more of those during the actual throws on what constitutes a score or not. Now Cody's going to talk a little bit more about the hierarchy of the lines. So basically, whenever the frisbee lands on a line, it's counted as in whatever zone that is. So here it's easy. If it lands on this line, it counts as in the score zone. If it lands on this line, it counts as in the bounce zone. But what do you do with these shared lines? Well, you only have to remember one rule: the penalty zone rules. So if it bounces on the line that makes up the boundary between the bounce zone and the penalty zone, it's counted as if it bounces in the penalty zone. This is important for a lot of the plays that occur during Frizz. So you have the first bounce coming in and it lands on the line. Well, that counts as a penalty because it counts as landing in the penalty zone. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you release the frisbee, it's one of 2 things. It's going to be either a pitch or a penalty. So let's talk about a pitch. So what defines a pitch? Well, take a look at it. So, a pitch, basically, all you have to remember is 2 things must occur. It's very simple. The 2 things that must occur to make it a legal pitch is, first of all, you must be in your respective score zone when you release the frisbee and attempt to make a pitch. And then second of all, the first bounce must be in the bounce zone. It's as simple as that. If it doesn't meet that criteria, then it's not a pitch, and if it's not a pitch, it's a penalty. So to sum that up, you must be in your respective score zone, and the first bounce must be in the bounce zone.
So there's basically three scenarios that can occur from a pitch, and that is a score, a catch, or out of bounds. So Cody's going to talk about the different scenarios for out of bounds.
So it is also important to note before we get too far in depth on out of bounds that if your first bounce is in the bounce zone, your secondary bounce can be outside of the field of play, or it can even be in the penalty zone and it's still okay. So your first bounce is here, second bounce is here, it's still in play. He still has to catch it. First bounce here, second bounce here, it's still in play. He still has to catch it. Now, here's how you get one of the out of bounds that we're going to talk about. If your first bounce is here and your second bounce is after the pitch line but outside of the field of play, it's going to be a dead frisbee. It's going to be out of play. There's no opportunity to score after that point. Now, with that being said, you can bounce it here. Second bounce here, still legal. Third bounce could be here, still legal. But if that fourth bounce somehow ends up here, out of bounds. Another common way to get out of bounds is if you make a throw, it bounces here, it looks perfectly fine, but it's way too high. There's no way he's going to catch that. It's agreed upon by both players, or if you have a ref. It's going to be called a height rule, like this one. That's a pretty common way to get an out of bounds, for it to be out of bounds. Another common way for it to be out of bounds is through a rule called defined as maintaining contact with the ground while passing through the pitch line. So that usually occurs in a roll or a skid. Basically, you throw the frisbee, maybe it dives into the ground a little bit and it skids across your pitch line. That's going to be out of play. Now, however, if you throw the frisbee and it nosedives and it skids across the penalty line, but then pops back up before the pitch line, that's still in play. He has to make the catch. So those are probably the most common ways to get out of play. Do you have anything else to add on that?
No, that's pretty much it. So skid, basically skid across the pitch line. A roll, you may throw it, it turns over and just rolls across the line. Another scenario that may occur where it's a dead frisbee is you throw it, and let's say you hit the ground. It doesn't really bounce. It kind of fitters out right in here, or maybe it hits the ground and bounces and kind of just slides across the parallel lines. It's a dead frisbee. There's no penalty there because it's still a legal pitch. You made your throw in here. The first bounce was in here, so it's a legal pitch. You don't get a penalty for it. It's just dead, and the other player gets to throw it. So now we're going to talk about how do you score. So again, the goal of the game of Frizz is to score as many points as you can. So how do you score? You essentially, so like if this is the offensive player, he's making a throw, he's essentially trying to make a legal pitch that gets past the defender. So like maybe a bounce here and then it comes in back here, the defender can't get to it, that's a score. Or let's say a bounce here and this guy makes an error. Next, let's talk about the flag. So let's say this is the offensive player, he makes a throw here and it's coming in, and let's say it comes inside of the flag. So if you're playing sanctioned player or whatnot, or if you're fortunate enough to have flags out on the field, that again kind of defines the back of that score zone. Let's say that frisbee comes inside, then that's a score. However, it bounces here, or let's say it bounces here, and then that second one comes outside of that flag, that is out of bounds, that's not a score.
Now, Josh, I have a question for you. So if he throws it and it bounces here, and it passes through here, still in the air, and lands back here, but it passes before the flag, is that still good?
That's a good question. So, yeah, let's say you get, you get a massive hop here, you bounce it here, and it stays in the air, comes all the way out here, flies and lands back here. is still coming through this area, so that's still a score. This defender has to get there and make the catch. So it's really just essentially if that bounce comes outside of the flag, then it's out of bounds. So again, most of the times casual play you're not playing with the flags, you know those you kind of have to rely on mutual agreement among the players. Of course, the last scenario is the defender catches it. So you make a good bounce, a legal pitch, and the defender catches it. It's now his turn to throw, and that's basically the goal of Frizz there. So now we're going to talk about penalties. So basically, there's different types of penalties that can occur. There's offensive penalties and defensive penalties. So we're going to talk about offensive penalties first. This occurs can be occurring when you're throwing, so a throwing penalty or a positioning penalty. A throwing penalty can occur when essentially you don't make a legal pitch. So you're standing here and let's say you're trying out a new throw, and you throw it all the way across. That first bounce is not in the bounce zone, it's a penalty. And that occurs for wherever you throw it. If you make a throw and it lands out here, 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 if it's that first bounce isn't in here, that's a penalty. That's a throwing penalty. The other offensive penalty is a positioning penalty. So again, we said it always goes back to the two main things that make up a legal pitch, and that's you have to be in your score zone. So if you make the throw and you're out here, that's illegal. That's a penalty. There's also delay of game. This occurs basically upon mutual agreement upon the players. So a shot clock occurs. You must make your throw as the offensive player within 10 seconds. When does that start? Well, it starts when basically two things must happen. You have to have the frisbee in hand and be in your respective score zone. So let's say this guy is gathering some frisbees out here. He goes to get a frisbee. As soon as he steps back in to his respective score zone with the frisbee in hand, time starts and he must make that throw in 10 seconds. So the opposing player can call a delay of game. The first time is a warning. Second time is a penalty. Next is defensive penalties. So that can occur in basically positioning. So let's say that player is the offensive player, he makes a throw, and this defensive player steps in front of the pitch line to make the catch. If he makes that catch in front of the pitch line here, or that imaginary pitch line right here, if he steps in front of that to make the catch, that's illegal, and that's a penalty on the defensive player. Any other defensive penalties you can think of?
Not really. That pretty much covers it. So what's going to happen after he gets these 3 penalties? He's got to have some kind of punishment. So let's say Josh is over here. He makes us 3 penalty throws. Once he makes those 3 penalty throws, his opponent is awarded penalty shots. So there's several advantages to penalty shots. One is you can't get penalties, or the offensive player cannot get penalties during penalty shots. Now it is important to remember that the defensive player can still receive defensive penalties during the penalty shots. Now, when he would normally receive a penalty, it would act as if it's out of bounds. So if he's outside of his score zone, well, let me get to that real quick. So also another benefit of penalty shots is he gets to step up to the penalty line. So essentially this penalty line is acting as this new pitch line. So in this case, if he stepped over the penalty line when he made his shot, that would be a penalty, but he's doing his penalty shots, so it's essentially out of play. He has no opportunity to score, but it's not a penalty. So the third advantage is that he gets 3 consecutive shots. He throws it, he gets the frisbee back. He throws it, he gets the frisbee back. He throws it, he gets the frisbee back, and he gets to start off gameplay again with the clock going. And that pretty much wraps up the penalty shots, unless you have anything to add.
Yeah, that's about it. So a pretty nice advantage for the offensive player. So listen, the defensive player, once they accumulate 3 penalties, then as soon as they accumulate that third one, they automatically go back to 0. So if they're defending during penalty shots and they get a defensive positioning penalty, they get another penalty, and that's
they start out with 1.
Yep. One of the advantages to the offensive player is that they can try some different throws because they're not going to get a penalty if they make a bad throw, or if their first bounce happens to be in this penalty zone, they're not getting a penalty on it. So a good advantage there, and then getting essentially 4 throws in a row. So that sums up kind of the basics of Frizz, how to play. So I hope that was some good insight for you. Please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, email us at frizzvision@gmail.com, and let us know if you have any questions, comments. We also have these fields available. Please message us if you're interested in getting one and getting started playing in your community or with your friends. Please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, we'd love to help you out any way we can. Just feel free to keep watching our videos, email us, anything. We just want to grow the sport,
Yep, so help us promote the sport. Let us know if you like us, and go get your friends and play Frizz. Thanks.
That was actually pretty damn good. Like, we hit some points that we haven't even hit on yet.